It's never be. I won't sing too much. There we go. Morgan, how are you today?
Good morning. Happy Wednesday.
Is
This
it
is
not the happiest of Wednesdays?
the happiest of Wednesdays for this event. We've got some awesome people in our green room right now.
I got my notepad ready. I studied.
Oh,
I studied the best I could. I couldn't crash too hard.
I mean, how can you study when you have both Jen and Brandon on the same show? It's
Oh,
just, I know. Shall we bring them on?
let's do it. Here
Let's
we
do it.
go.
Hello.
Hey
Welcome,
guys.
welcome.
Hey
Happy
Jen.
Wednesday.
Hey, Brandon.
Happy Wednesday.
The
So
happiest. The happiest.
Yeah.
the happiest. Well, folks, we always like to kick off our streams, our live shows like this with a question of the day. Sometimes it's related to the topic, sometimes it's not, but it's always something lighthearted and it helps people warm up chat. So we want to hear your answers. If you're with us today watching on, drop them in chat, say hello to our guests. So Nick, what's our question of the day?
Ooh, I think Brandon will appreciate this one. Does hustle have any part in sales today?
Ooh. Okay, so I was definitely a big constant hustler early in my career, but had to learn the hard way that it doesn't work. It got me to a certain stage, but to advance to the breakout stages, particularly in the enterprise space, it no longer served me. So yeah, I would say hustle healthy. That's the best advice I can give.
Just before I ask Jen, I have one question for you. After reading your book, Brandon, have you read Essentialism?
It's on my list. I haven't read it yet.
Okay.
Yeah. I can't wait to read it.
It's
Okay.
really good.
It's great. Jen.
And what do you think?
Yeah, I actually, Brandon, you wrote a post yesterday about some of your takeaways and kind of the bumps of selling in enterprise. And I loved that post. So if anyone hasn't seen it, check it out. It was yesterday. I agree. I think personally, I've definitely found myself when I made the transition from transactional to enterprise, believing that hard work was the right motion and just spending time like running my wheels and getting nowhere. And I think obviously I work for Challenger and a lot of my sales approach has been informed by that. When you look at the data, even the hard worker profile is one of the lowest performing profiles in complex sales. So I think, we have our own opinions about it, but it's also proven out in some of the research that we've done when you study high performers in a complex motion.
Well, it makes sense. How many times have you guys been researching an account and then started writing your message and then didn't even send the message. Now you're researching something else. Now you're on LinkedIn and now you're going to go and get your phone numbers ready. And next thing you know, it's 2 p.m. You have literally done nothing.
Anybody can be busy. And that's a trap that we often fall in.
Yeah, I think I had to unlearn this one.
Yeah.
Just having worked for myself for so long now that I definitely learned the pros of investing time and energy and thinking the hustle was going to be the solution and you just got to put in the extra hour or the extra 30 minutes or you just got to push through. And I think now I've realized what about leverage? What are the little bits that produce a lot of results? And can I just focus on those, please? Because it's a lot easier,
Yeah, much more sustainable when you have a system in place. And then that's the high leverage motion you just execute on every day. Once you tap into that, then you can manage your time, your energy, and your attention in much more effective ways. Another great book is Cal Newport's Deep Work. And the more you can carve out that deep work, that's what separates you in this knowledge economy that we're in. So besides the data coming from all the great stuff in the Challenger world, if you look at what our brains are equipped with, there's literally only so much good work we can do that our brains can serve us on. And if you try to go over that, it's diminishing returns. So this thought of 12, 14, 8-hour days, you're literally just doing bad work. You're just piling the bad work on top of more bad work. And it's no wonder you feel irritable. It's no wonder you've got to supplement your energy with more caffeine or whatever else to keep you going. So you're better focusing on the high leverage activities and working less, finding that right harmony of the number of hours that you need, and letting your brain do that work that it needs, that deep work. And I think the research says it's about 4 hours of that highly concentrated deep work, and then balance that with maybe another 4 hours of meetings and answering, responding to emails. That's a more sustainable path than constantly hustling and grinding and trying to wear a lack of sleep like a badge of honor, being constantly sleep deprived, irritable. That's going to creep into other parts of your life, like your relationships.
Yeah.
People don't want you to go back to work drunk, but they'll brag about brag about being tired all the time. And and there's been so many different research studies that have shown that if you have a sleep deficit, I think it's only an hour over a few days, that it's comparable to being drunk.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Crazy. Nick, what about you? You asked your own question but haven't answered it, and then we'll dive in.
I got myself into a lot of trouble when I tried to hustle in big deals. And the problem was that my managers pushed me to hustle. When I would do document requests, they're like, well, we need it now. If they're not willing to do it, like I remember one time they told me to go do a doc request Friday at 4:30 p.m. and told them that if they didn't send me the docs before 5 o'clock, they were going to charge them a bill to do the doc pull for them. And so everything was rushed, and it created this rift. And I noticed that, but whether it was between me and management, me and the buyers, you create this rift when you try to rush things because you miss things.
Yeah.
And so, yes, you can hustle at the start to go in. I think it's even good to hustle at the start just to go and get that pattern recognition, like do enough meetings, do enough cold calls, do enough LinkedIn approaches, that you build up that pattern recognition of good, better, best. But the hustle, I almost lost a few deals getting pushed to hustle through. And like I was in investment banking, I was selling businesses mainly 40 million to 200 million. And you can't, so when somebody's whole livelihood is on the line, they've worked their entire life this is their retirement plan. Do you think they want you cutting corners just because you want to close the deal faster? Like,
oh, man.
Just because your manager needs to get it done by the end of the quarter? Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, These are people's lives. Yeah.
So for everyone who's joining us, I see we got plenty of people commenting already. Please, if this is your first Power Hour, this is your hour as much as ours. We, of course, have plenty of questions. I know Jen and Brandon, Nick and I are going to ask each other questions as we go through the hour. But if you have stuff that comes up, if you have comments, if you have questions, drop them in chat. We'll throw them up on the screen and ask our crew when we have the opportunity to. So where maybe I kind of wanted to start today, Nick, just to kick this off, was to ask Brandon. And you mentioned this in your post yesterday, and we continue to mention this just because it was a great post. But designing the buying experience. And this is something that I don't hear a lot in sales lingo. And it's funny because in a previous life as a brand strategist, like this is how I thought about
your jam.
Like this is my jam. I was thinking about first touch to customer success. How does the whole experience work? So for you, when you're navigating or thinking about enterprise deals, what are those fundamental keystones or fundamental ideas in designing the experience for the buyer to buy better?
Yeah. So this was really crystallized when I joined a conversational AI leader, a company called LivePerson, in 2018. And we were literally handed the book Challenger Customer. So Jen, giving you a plug there, but it was eye-opening because it reinforced a lot of the ideas that I had already been doing in enterprise selling and selling enterprise for a late stage startup where I was before LivePerson, not true enterprise. So when I was leveling up to true enterprise and strategic accounts and working with Fortune 100, Fortune 50 level brands, the biggest thing I noticed, one, obviously you have multiple stakeholders. I think the Challenger customer outlines that you've got an average of 5.4 stakeholders who need to weigh in on a large, complex deal. And I was really trying to paint a vision of a transformation using conversational AI. So that is fundamentally a different type of sales motion than selling a transaction of, hey, you've got a problem, like, here's what we do. We fit in a box and, it's simple plug and play. When you are dealing with multiple stakeholders, when you are dealing with complex integrations on the back end, if you're in the software as a service business in SaaS, that it's not going to be easy, that this client, this prospect, this brand needs a lot of effort, a lot of work. So that takes people coming together and wanting to agree on multiple touch points across that journey. So I took myself out of, wait a minute, this is not solving for how to help them sell or help them, or it's not selling them. They're already sold on, oh yeah, that makes sense. We need this artificial intelligence to make a better customer experience. If it was a transaction, that would have been very easy for them to just say yes to. But they wanted more than just a solution. They wanted to transform their customer experience. So it wasn't selling them on, oh, use this chat service or use this messaging service, use this automation to make the customer experience better. It was about designing the experience for them to fully understand what a transformation looks like. So I think the key points were ensuring that I could link up with somebody referenced in the book as the mobilizer, somebody who had the energy and the impetus to want to drive this transformational change within the organization. So that was like key number one, because then it was helping them to fully understand what we were capable of, along with what the company wanted to achieve. And so when we could find that middle ground, then we could work together in unison to get the other stakeholders rallied behind that transformation. So that took good experiences every time we were engaged, whether that was in a presentation or a meeting or a demo or asynchronous collaboration where we were writing in their words, here's what the transformation for a new customer experience using conversational AI looked like. It wasn't me handing over our marketing materials. It was us co-designing in their language, their words, so that mobilizer could go and sell that across the 5.4, really many more stakeholders involved than just 5.4 inside their four walls.
That's cool. I love that. Jen, is it nice to hear Challenger?
It's so nice, Brandon. And I feel the same way. I think, like I said before, I've largely been influenced by the work Challenger has done. And when the Challenger sale got a ton of, attention, and the Challenger customer is like this forgotten child that we have that some people read and they're like, I like it better than Challenger sale. But I think for me, the biggest hurdle I faced in moving from more of a transactional, $50,000 price point up to a 7-figure price point was I was, to your point, Brandon, I was talking to whoever was excited to talk to me about the product, right? Mm-hmm. And I think in a large enterprise sale, one of the most difficult things is you are literally moving the Titanic. And to find that one person who throws their hand up and says, sure, I'll risk my political capital. I'll go ask for budget. I'll get 25 people in a room, which is all work in addition to the job that they have. It is really hard, right? Not a lot of people are crazy like that and will sign up for that job. And the way we activate them is rarely by talking about our solution. So as Brandon mentioned, right, it's not like, here's a shiny piece of marketing collateral. And they're like, let me get everybody in the room so we can talk about it. Yeah. It's really, I think the biggest difference between transactional and enterprise was my role completely shifted, that I was out there, to Brandon's point, finding something that the CEO, the board, people were pushing the organization to do, and then educating them on something that they may have missed based on my observations, based on my research. So I would never, in a large enterprise sale, lead in with an email or a cold call around, hey, I saw you're doing this. I'd love to show you our solution for that. It's really about, I've got to bring something to the table, almost like a McKinsey would, right? Like, I think largely one of the reasons they can sell as many 7-figure deals as they do is because they are bringing unique perspective to a business. And we as sellers, I think, sometimes undervalue how much unique perspective we have that we can bring if we just stop talking about our solution and our stuff.
Yeah. I think that's such a good point. Thinking like these big consulting firms do, Accenture, McKinsey, Deloitte, they are great at capturing huge dollars, 7, 8, even 9-figure sums, because they are designing this experience. They're designing the transformation. They know they get connected with the right stakeholders, these true mobilizers who understand, okay, I want to make change inside our organization. It is hard. There are politics. There are legacy infrastructure in place. So they don't start with the product. They don't start with the solution. They go find the products and solutions in the technology companies. But what I found is when you can bring that level of insight as an individual seller, so you're sort of helping them to not spend $500,000 just to go talk with the consulting firm who will go take 9 months to just do that due diligence, bring that to them, right? But also have the benefit of being a direct liaison with the technology company. That's the happy medium. That's why I was consistent with selling 7-figure deals, not the traditional land and expand. Oh, let me sell a $250,000 accelerator program here, and then hopefully 12 months down the line. I found that where you start is where you're going to stay. And a $250,000 solution keeps you in a small box. It keeps you in that commodity box. It keeps you in the products and features. It keeps you in the, we're going to send out an RFP that we want you to respond to. When you level up and you get your prospects to think big, then you're expanding your audience. You're going to the deep blue sea where the whales are. You're going to naturally start to pick off the competition because you're talking about big stakes. You're talking about true transformation. But then you get them to think small. Think big, but then act small. I'm sorry. So thinking big with the vision, but then telling them very prescriptively, here's where we start. And then here's where we progress from there. So showing them that maturity model, that was a big thing that, again, the Deloittes of the world, the McKinseys of the world do extremely well, that we need to do more of as enterprise strategic sellers.
Yeah, and I think about it from the perspective of a buyer, right? If I'm on a call or I'm looking at outreach, what is it that I want to take to other people? I want to take an idea. I don't want to take something that costs money. I want to look like the smart person in the room. And I will tell you, I've had customers say, this is the kind of perspective and point of view I wish I had the time to uncover, but I don't, because I'm running from call to call and we're fighting fire after fire. There is a reason buyers attach to it so much, because they get very activated by ideas. What they don't get activated by is, here's a solution and it costs this much, and now you have to be the person who runs around the hallways talking about it. So I love the way that Brandon talks about it, because you really do need to attach to a thing that warrants the 7-figure investment. And that's another misstep that I made a lot. I would assume, hey, we can drive a 15-time ROI on this tiny problem. And I wasn't attaching it to a much higher problem. So to me, naively, it felt like, hey, that's a huge impact. But relative to them and the things they were talking about in ELT meetings and with their board, none of that stuff was on their radar. And I think one of the blessings that we have available to us now, and I saw this as a question in the chat, is there is so much information available at our fingertips. There is no excuse why I can show up to a call and not have pretty darn good assumptions around what that company is trying to achieve and how they're trying to get there. And so that's the other thing when we think about, as Brandon talked about, like the hustle culture and all that. Sure, could I send 1,000 emails and hope to get like one bite? I could. I would never do that. I would always be in favor of saying, let me go deep on what this company is trying to achieve and figure out what is their belief system and how might I change that such that they would then be interested in having a conversation about the place where we can help. Like that to me is time well spent. And I would spend far fewer emails. I would write far fewer outreach messages to different people. I would spend that time really deeply understanding it. And then one thing I love that I think Brandon, you do tremendously well, Nick, Morgan, you do this well too, is I would show up with that perspective where my customers go to learn. For me, it's LinkedIn. I've sold to companies that sell to homeowners associations and they play on Facebook. I don't care what your channel is, but figuring out how can I put that at scale? Because then it's not just one message, one target. You're teaching people where they go to learn.
Yeah.
If we go to the chat, one thing I'd like to go and add is before you reach out, how many of you do a value hypothesis? How many people take the time to go and read, do their research, and come to a meeting with an idea? Kind of like what Jen and Brandon are talking about is that consumer insight, that you have something that they never connected the dots because they didn't have the mental capacity or time to go and do it. And so when you're showing up to that meeting with that value hypothesis, yes, they're going to challenge you. Yes, they're going to check your numbers. But think about that. If you're not doing it right now, how would that change your conversation when you come in and you point out something either the CEO didn't know yet or the CEO is talking about at high levels in meetings you don't have access to, wondering how the heck they could solve it or why it's happening?
Blake has a really interesting question, which I think dovetails with this, which is for anybody here on the call, like what tools are you leveraging for doing research on these companies? And I think maybe it's important to distinguish. Maybe we can tackle public and then we can tackle private. So wherever you want to start, I think I'd be interested.
Yeah, I'll start because this is one I'm super passionate about. Like for a long time, I think it was an excuse like, hey, a company's private. We just can't learn about them. We have to do discovery on the call and have them tell us what they need. Again, we live in an era where we have so much information. My personal favorite tactic is to Google CEO plus podcast or CEO plus interview. And what you'll find is in many cases, big or small, private or public, the CEO is out there talking about their company. Companies in general, I think, are investing more in having a social presence and talking publicly about what they're trying to achieve. I have learned so much by watching snippets of podcasts about that CEO's belief system, which then help inform my outreach to a sales leader to say, John was talking about this. It sounds like you're trying to pursue it this way. In working with other customers, here's one pitfall that many organizations don't appreciate. Would it make sense to just kind of explore that a little bit more and have a conversation that is not in any way, shape, or form about what I sell, but everything about things I'm hearing? So for me personally, sometimes like with LinkedIn, it can be a little troublesome. Like I don't see a ton of CSOs who are my target segment posting, but you might see them commenting. But in absence of that, like just Googling and trying to see, can you find an interview where they're talking about their business? But that's just one take.
Yeah. I think Jen hits on something really important there is just keeping it simple. I think in so many scenarios, sellers and leaders like to overcomplicate things that I need a tool for every specific situation. Sometimes it's just very simple. So again, past 4 years, I was very fortunate to be in a role where I was selling customer transformation, and that's to business to consumer brands and all the brands that we know well, right? From a shoe company that shoes we all wear to coffee we all drink to planes we all fly on. So that was like really fun. And that was the other thing that, again, helped me to get out of this hustle culture. It was exciting to work on needing to get so good. Again, back to this design thinking, I was always thinking to myself, how could I be so good inside their four walls that they would actually want to hire me? These McKinsey consultants, Deloitte consultants, they get so good. In some ways, they're given a badge to be like an employee. They're given an email address at these organizations. So from the outside, I went through a really powerful exercise, going from 2018 into 2019, where I rethought my account list. And I prioritized it based on very specific criteria to me. And I wanted to tie that personal meeting to brands that I knew, one, either I had industry knowledge on, or criteria that I knew, like, as a seller were important, like moving fast. So my strategic account list of 50 accounts, I completely eliminated financial services. Didn't have any experience there, so I didn't have any knowledge or value that I could bring. I worked as a consumer with had a few banks that I could speak to from the consumer experience, but I also knew the financial services industry notoriously moved slow just through their natural due diligence process. So that eliminated waste on my account list that I could go in on hyper focus, apply the deep work to an account list that was much more meaningful to me, industries where I knew I had knowledge, and then become their own customer. So I was in this unique perspective where I could have insights as one of their top customers, and also be in an industry where I knew I could transform it from a technology perspective. So blending those two things allowed me to have the excitement and the momentum that we need every day on these long sales cycles, and be really excited, but also have the focus and the concentration to do the deep work necessary to come up with those insights and share those insights.
Oh, I love that. I'm going to just totally admit a big mistake I made when I started selling enterprise is I would filter and prioritize my opportunities by number of salespeople, right? Because I sell a sales solution. I would say, all right, if Microsoft's in my territory, they have the most, so they're priority number one. And what I failed to do when I was starting off in enterprise selling is exactly what Brandon said, right? Like, yes, there may be some measure that makes them a good fit, but when we think about the problem that our solution solves for, to what extent can I see evidence that that company is addressing that problem or feeling that problem? It completely changed the way that I prioritize my accounts. There's one healthcare company I went after for 2 years. I cannot tell you the amount of hours I spent reaching out to this customer. I'm fairly certain I was on their block sender list. So even worse, it was probably just going into an abyss. But I kept going after it because I was like, oh, but they have so many salespeople and they're in the healthcare industry and we do well there. But I never had evidence to support that they had the problem. And so that was a big misstep on my part for sure.
It was interesting.
Yeah, we can fall into that trap. And it's so tantalizing, when we look on paper, but sometimes we need that feedback loop and we need that personal system to say, okay, I'm not making progress here. Maybe it's time, because we're managing our business. We have to think of ourselves think like a venture capitalist, but then act like a CEO. Your account list is your business, and let your company invest in you. And then it's up to you to take that ownership and that accountability to say, here's the account plan, here's the account strategy, and why, and really fight for that, and say, here's the reason why I'm making the decision, and here's the data to back it up. So I think it's so important that we can fall in that trap. It's tantalizing. I got Apple off of my list, Walmart, the world's largest company, off of my list, because I knew there were other folks who were better served in the retail sector at my organization. And I knew I wasn't going to be sitting across the table from Tim Cook anytime soon. So I couldn't apply the transformation motions from my personal playbook that I could when I went further down the Fortune 500 list. I was going to be stuck. Apple was going to dictate the terms and say, no, our way. We're going to draw you through. You're going to talk at these director levels out of their Austin offices, and you're going to be stuck in this small little world. We're not going to talk transformation. We're going to do it our way. Same thing at Walmart. So I needed to make those decisions at some point for my business to say, okay, I'm going to double down on, the companies that are in the, 40s, 50s of the Fortune 100 lists. That's where I can get 7-figure deals done, and I can move in the time horizon that makes sense for me, which was trying to close a 7-figure deal within 12 months.
Yeah. Last thing I'll add to what you said is I think sometimes it's really easy we convince ourselves that everybody needs what we offer. Like we sell sales, training, and transformation. Everybody needs it. Nobody needs it. It doesn't keep anybody's lights on, right? And it's like, wouldn't you want your sales reps to be better? Sure, but I've got a million other things I need to do. Like that's where I get really, really hyper focused on. I need to convince myself out of that type of talk. And I need to say, what is a statement? What is a comment? What is something someone has said in that organization that allows me to believe that they see the problem as big as I do? And if they don't, how am I going to change their perspective? And that's where I think like social and our email outreach is really useful. It's not to get them to want to take a meeting with us. It's to pepper in ideas that get them saying, maybe I should think a little bit differently, or maybe I should at least explore the problem in this manner that I haven't thought about. And that I think is another big difference between transactional and enterprise. Like when you look at a transactional cold outbound motion, candidly, you could probably get away with a ton of just like, here's the problem we solve and here's the solution we have for it. Do you want 15 minutes? Brandon, I don't know about you, but like those emails never worked for me in large enterprise. And if they did, it was with a talker, right? And they're like, sure, tell me all about what you got. And I'm like, okay, cool. What are you going to do with this?
That doesn't go anywhere. Yeah. That's a problem.
Nice people talking to nice people doing nothing.
Yeah, right. That's a dead end for sure. Yeah, you're looking for those breadcrumbs, and it's just something as simple as turning on Google Alerts. You're talking with really large enterprises. It's very easy to know at the contact level who are the key stakeholders. Set up a Google Alert for that person. Follow them on Twitter. Follow them on LinkedIn. See where they are speaking. Chances are they're putting something out there and you want to engage with their content. You want to understand, follow them on LinkedIn and like their posts. Connect with others so that they see that you're connected with other people at their organization, and then start to build a relationship. This is something that takes patience. This is going to be a slow, deliberate, strategic build. So you do have to be very intentional and deliberate with all of your actions. And then when you feel like you can add value, thinking again like a designer, thinking like a consultant, hey, now is the right time. Actually, I do have a perspective. I have an idea. I have an insight that would help them based off of that post or based off of that thing they talked about at that big event. So if you're feeding your system with the inputs, then you can have naturally a good output, and you can guide your decisions based off of, this little system that you build. Again, keeping it simple sometimes is the best way to do it.
Totally.
Yeah,
Nick?
You got to start with the end in mind. I think this is where we get lost as sellers all the time. Like when I was selling business, nobody wanted to sell their business. If they did, usually it was a sign there was something really bad happening and they were trying to get away from it. And so I had to go and find companies that showed me triggers, signs of change, or something that where it would make more sense for me to sell them to a bigger company strategically. But how do you tell somebody to sell their baby when they're not ready? And so you have to start with the end in mind. It's like, so what is it? When we talk about tech, it's like, what are the APIs? What are all those connecting points that bring synergy? How is that actually look in their business post-acquisition? How are they going to see the real value in that? How long is it going to take? How many people is it going to take? And so one of the biggest things I see from enterprise versus mid-market is the discipline on implementation. Is that you're actually going through and looking at, how do I deliver on my promise? Who do I need to be involved? And two, it's a team sport. Yeah. The one thing that nobody talks about in enterprise, except for you guys both do, is that you don't do it by yourself. You pick your team of Avengers to go and support you that are really good at one piece, and you coordinate them all together, because you can't do everything. But if you don't figure out that implementation, you don't figure out where that real business case is and how you're going to get there, then it doesn't matter how many times you reach out. There's no real reason for them at a C-suite or even like VP level to take your meeting, because that's what they're focused on, is what is the future going to bring.
Yeah. I mean, I think a big mistake I made in the past was I went from transactional my first year in selling like true large enterprise 7-figure deals. I wanted to be the hero, right? I was so obsessed with, I want to prove to everybody that I can do this and I can do it on my own. And upon reflecting on it, I think I would have closed it faster had I not, because part of the problem with selling a 7-figure deal solo is you are the only interface between that customer and you. And what kind of crazy customer is okay just being like, sure, I'll take Jen's word for it. Like, they want to see the experience. They want to see that this is not just a sales experience that a great seller delivers, and then the quality of the customer experience is vastly different. If I could go back and do it again, I would have brought others in much faster. And I think sometimes it's much more about letting up control. And those of us that get into large enterprise sales are often kind of type A and like having control over everything, but managing that process and understanding if the experience that I'm delivering is to show someone, here is what, it's going to be like when you work with us, and here's the implementation, figuring out who on the implementation team on my side is going to be able to show up, and then prepping with them to say, here's the landmines I don't want you walking into. Here are the words don't say. Here's the language that this customer uses. Here's the problem that they're seeking to solve. And if you really play quarterback, like, you have to coach everybody on their team because they don't have the benefit of sitting in every other call like you did. I've seen some people make some bad errors thinking, I'm just going to pick the best client success person and pull them in. And they do very little prep. And it's no wonder why the call doesn't go very well, right? Like, the context is so essential in enterprise.
Yeah. Goes back to designing that good buying experience. So everything that Jen outlined, those are pieces to designing a good buying experience. I've seen so many sellers put themselves in the hot seat by not doing that prep. Just schedule every time with, even if it's with your solutions consultant, schedule a time pre and post every time you interact with the clients. And I always made it a principle. So a part of design thinking is you're using principles to sort of guide your decisions. And that helps you, going back to the deep work and taking that cognitive load off of your brain. We have so many things coming at us. Emails from our prospects, emails from our clients, emails from our coworkers, our leaders, Slack, social media. There's so much coming at us that we need to take that decision fatigue away. And a way to do that is operating off of principles. So if you have these simple rules in place, this is how I operate. This is how I design a good buying experience for a large customer. You have those things in place. I will always make it easier on everybody I engage with, client side and internally. If you do that, you make your job easier. Again, getting away from this idea, I have to do it all myself. You can, if you want to sell a 7-figure deal fast and consistently. You just simply can't. And you're better off sort of outsourcing a lot of those things. Negotiating contracts. There are much better people suited. There's a quote I live by, which is, I am a generalist with my skill set, but a specialist with my outcomes. Meaning, there are so many better negotiators out there, much better presenters out there, much better people showing what it's going to be like to be a customer of our organization because they run operations, they run customer success. I can't be that person. I'm going to pull them in, make their job easier, just like Jen was saying, and tell them, here is their terminology. Here's what they call their customers. Here's what they call their employees. Don't call them contact center service reps. Call them advisors, right? And those little small things that provides the spark when you're in a room with a large executive team. They're going to pick up on those things. So make everybody's job easier. That's essentially your role. You're sort of this orchestrator. You're this quarterback. You're a project manager. That's what the work comes down to. Design a good buying experience and then manage each account like a project. That's when you can get into a closing ratio of 70+%. And you don't need many deals in a year. You really don't. You go deep on the ones that have meaning to you, and you design these really great experiences, pulling in the leverage and the momentum of other experts within your organization. And they love it too.
There was a comment a little bit ago, which I don't want to lose, from Terry, who had asked basically, how do you determine your mobilizer? And even we brought up like the talker and some of these other personas from challenger customers. So can you comment on the value of a stakeholder map and whether they have the power to move for big strategic change. So maybe punt to Jen really quick. Like, how do you do this? Like, how do you find the right person to be that mobilizer in a deal?
Yeah. So let me just define terms, because I know not everybody has read Challenger Customer. And this was like mind blowing stuff for me because I was doing it all wrong. So basically, just like we profiled sellers, we profiled buyers. And this never happens in our research. I mean, never, 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 never. What we found was high performers, 100% of high performers targeted 3 types of stakeholders. 100% of core performers targeted another 3 type of stakeholders. And essentially, when you like label them, the high performer camp, they tend to focus on what we call mobilizers, which are people who will do the work beyond just nodding, yes, I see value in what you offer, to actually take the deal forward. And a stat that I was kind of blown away by is out of all the people who want to buy what you have to sell, only 49% of them will actually advocate for you and take it the next step. In enterprise deals, you cannot sell it alone. You absolutely, to Brandon's point earlier, need someone working with you inside of that organization. And that's what a mobilizer will do. The other camp is called talkers. Now, talkers, man, they are so easy to talk to because you reach out, your manager's on your back saying you need to up your activity level. They will always take your call because they got nothing better to do. And they'll just talk to you all day long about, we're going to change this and this is what we're going to do different. But then when it comes time to say, all right, now how do we get this in front of the broader buying group? All of a sudden they're nowhere to be found. Right. And so it's a trap. I fell into it. I would talk to talkers because it made me feel like I was making forward progress. What I've come to learn is mobilizers are often somewhat skeptical at first. So they present almost as if they are debating you and not believing you. But the thing that all mobilizers are activated by, getting back to Brandon's point, is insight. So if you go to a mobilizer and talk to them about your solution, it will fall on deaf ears. If you go to a mobilizer and say, I observed that your CEO said that you're trying to achieve X, and here's the way that you're thinking about it. What we've learned in studying this or working with other customers is Z. They will perk up, but they will not make it easy for you. They will ask all sorts of questions to pick it apart. But the reason they do that is not because they don't want what you're selling. It's because in the back of their mind, they're saying, if I'm going to take this to my CEO or my boss or whoever, I do not want to get caught looking like I haven't got answers to these questions. And so they're pressure testing your idea. Right. And I think, to me, the best way that you can find a mobilizer is to present an insight to them and see how they engage. And there's 2 things you watch for. 1, are they asking skeptical questions? Meaning, are they not just saying like, that sounds awesome, let's move forward? They should be skeptical. And 2, are they talking in the language of we or me? Now, the reason this is important, and this is another place I got caught into when I was first selling enterprise, the people who prioritize me do the same thing in their business, right? So they only speak up when there's something that's beneficial to them, and the rest of the team knows it too. And so when you hear someone talking all about their own personal benefit is good, but if it's exclusively talking about how something benefits them, it's the same way they're going to show up to the rest of the buying team. They're going to say, we should do this because it helps me do this. So those are 2 cues that I'm looking for when I'm watching how they react. Are they saying me or we? And then are they being somewhat skeptical? If they are, that shows this is contrary to their current belief system. I may have something good here. A blocker is the other 3rd type. Those are people that are just anti-change, pro status quo. And really the best thing you can do there is get your mobilizer to change their thinking instead of you going to bat against them.
Yeah. That it's like, I hope everybody was just listening in the past 5 minutes. It's like, that's it. Like, those are the motions. That is it. It's almost to a T. That is how every deal gets done in these large, complex enterprise deals. And one little thing that I observed as well that I would add on to that is looking for somebody who has recently come over. They make a good, at a senior level, they make a good potential mobilizer. Somebody, especially we see this in IT, when you see a CTO who's been there for 15, 20, 25 years, you're going to get caught in probably, they're definitely going to push back. They might fall into the camp of a full-on detractor because they are set in their ways. But somebody who's been there, who has a fresh set of, hey, we need to accomplish this. They have the personal motivation to make that change, right? There is so much riding on this if they are charged with, a big enough title, right? A big enough role to say, hey, we've got to revamp the contact center. We have to revamp the customer experience, the marketing experience. Those are great people to sort of keep an eye out for. Again, you're looking for those breadcrumbs to feed you. And then once you get engaged with the mobilizer, as Jen laid out beautifully, that's the key, is following everything that she
Brandon, what you just said, I would have completely forgotten about this. It is, I literally had chills on my arm, because when I went back, and I do like a win-loss analysis on my deals. When I look back, one of the common characteristics of all of my 7-figure deals is they had turnover at the executive level. It wasn't always this chief sales officer. Sometimes it was the CEO, COO, president, but in every single one, they had it. And it's an impetus for change. And it's something we can track, right? Like, it's a trigger we can set up and learn that on LinkedIn. I would have completely forgotten to add, but it absolutely validates what you said. There's external change happening inside the organization that puts pressure on it. When I see a chief sales officer that's been there for 20 years, I literally have to have like 5 other reasons why that might be a good fit before I reach out. Because I'm like, they don't want to do anything different.
Exactly.
They got
Status quo. It's working, obviously.
Yes,
we
great point.
We have another question from Anish in chat a little bit ago. And apologies if we butcher anybody's names. I'm trying my best here. Could you talk more about timelines a rep ideally should take to close these sorts of deals? Brandon, I know you previously had set sort of a personal goal for closing these deals in 12 months. Is that like a good benchmark if people are following everything that's talked about today? Or how do you think through timelines?
Yeah, I don't think it has to be as long as we hear. I think sometimes it is industry specific. So Jen mentioned the healthcare industry. That is like financial services. That is another industry that just moves slowly because there are legal ramifications in the healthcare space, right? They have to do their due diligence. I sold to the largest healthcare company, and it took 2 years to close that deal, even though we had a direct connection from our CEO to their C-suite, the number 2 in charge. It still took that long. So there are some factors from an industry perspective that you just can't get around. So size of the company, industry, I think those are a couple of factors that will play in on the deal cycle length. And for me, I wanted to work within industries that could move quickly. So that was a part of the filter criteria that I used, that I layered on. And sometimes that's just going to take experience and that feedback loop, and the better as a business operator you can get at understanding what those things are through a good deal win-loss analysis, and start to dissect that with curiosity. I'm always a big fan of using curiosity after every deal, a win or a loss. Really dive deep, just as you would dive deep right? That's the discipline. You need discipline at the start. I call it flexibility in the middle, and then curiosity at the end. If you're using curiosity on your deals, it's going to be that feedback loop of saying, interesting. Here are some insights. This is why this deal took a little bit longer. There wasn't a transformational change, or I lost this deal because of X, Y, and Z. So I don't think there's a set number you can necessarily put. That's going to start to become a personal number of how long deals will take. And it's going to be, this loop of being disciplined at the start with your research and coming to, with a good organization and insights, the flexibility in the middle of that sales cycle to sort of be okay working and collaborating and understanding, oh, well, maybe this is a false mobilizer. I need to, change track and find a true mobilizer, and engage with them. I'm going to need to be flexible there. And then curiosity at the end of that deal cycle to really analyze what went well. So I double down on that. What didn't go well, I need to erase that going forward on my next deal.
Yeah. I mean, I would say here we've seen 7-figure deals sold as quickly as 3 months, and 7-figure deals sold as slowly as 2 years. And I think the determining factor often when I reflect on my own 7-figure deals is access, whether that is my direct access to the buying group or my mobilizer's direct access. The more access we have, the better it seems to move quickly, where it can be really slow and a slog. And frankly, some deals are just this way because of the culture of the customer that you're selling to. When you have a highly decentralized organization where there's people are just not in rooms together, but you need them to come together on this problem that you solve, it just expect it's going to take long. And that's where I think we have to have patience. I think selling large enterprise deals teaches you a lot of patience. We can't think about quarter close. And I wrote about this the other day. That was one of the big failure points. Like I was operating on hopium and thinking like, I think I can close it because they want to do it. And I completely missed asking questions around procurement and legal. And I could have been running some of those things concurrently from the point at which I had buy-in, but I waited way too long and then started it after. So I think one of the other things I've learned is where you can run different parts of the sale concurrently. Like, okay, we've got buy-in. Let's at least see if they'll start reviewing the MSA terms, because for some companies that'll take 2 months or 3 months. And that way, as I work on these other elements, I'm shortening my cycle by just meshing these two things together. So part of it's just experience, right? Like I wish I knew this stuff going into selling these deals. I didn't. I learned. It still closed the deal, but in retrospect, it could have been much faster.
That's how we get taught. We get taught to go linear.
Yeah.
And if one of the biggest things I learned from win-loss is there's clusters in every industry of activities. And if you, going back to Brandon's book about routine, like have your routine down, build those clusters into routines, and don't focus on like how short you can get it. Focus on shortening the times or those clusters that take the most time, dealing with procurement, legal, financing, whatever it may be. Put them into a cluster so that you're tackling that cluster all at once and you're staying ahead of it in your discovery so that you're starting that routine sooner. It doesn't mean you're rushing it. It just means that you're managing the expectation and bringing the right people to the table.
Yeah. I'll add, there's a story one of our clients told us. I won't say their name because I know they hate this story, but they said they had a massive 7-figure deal. It was like going to be, a blessing for this company. They had the CEO was their primary stakeholder. They had it all teed up to sign June 30th. The guy's like, I'm signing. We'll get this in. We'll do it on the last day, really make an impact. And then June 30th came and went. And then the next week, the seller is freaking out and finally got the CEO on the call. And the CEO said, yeah, I didn't actually realize I don't have signing authority to sign this amount. I need to have board approval first. And our next board meeting isn't until next month. And so the other thing it taught me is sometimes when you feel like you've already won the deal and it's just about moving through the motions of signature, I was completely underappreciating that things like that could happen. So I would have thought CEO, they have signing authority. And so it also forces us to make sure early on we're asking these questions, because when we've all talked about this, right? Buying's really hard. Sometimes our buyers don't even know how to buy, especially when they're buying something of this size. And it's our job to coach the buyer to say, I'm sure you have signing authority, but by chance, could you just double check that a solution of this size is something you don't need board approval for, you don't need someone's private equity approval for. And I miss those questions a lot in the beginning. And so now I know as I move along, if I ask that as we're still in the process, instead of waiting until we're in legal, I can get ahead of that. I allow my buyer the opportunity to get those answers in a timely fashion.
Yeah. Two accelerators that helped, close deals faster for me was just that, part of designing this good buying experience, couple things. One is asking the right questions and showing them, here's how to buy this transformation, right? Here are the steps that we're going to go through. And when you find that mobilizer, that's really your upfront effort, is quickly getting to a true mobilizer. And once you find that true mobilizer, a beacon for me was, can I get on a texting basis, right? Does this person want to text me personally? Hey, can we jump on a quick call before you talk with legal, procurement, or my boss, right? So those were always beacons that I knew, okay, this is somebody who's ready to co-design something together. And I know we can work together. We can put something about how we talk about the world and how we have a distinct point of view. We can put it on their paper so that they can translate it in their terms, their terminology, and go to their C-suite and say, we need to do this. So asking the right questions and showing them, Here's how you buy a transformation. Here are all the steps. Can you help me understand how that's done in your organization? Can you help me understand when you've done this in the past in other areas of the business, how this works? So outlining that. The second accelerant was getting to a design session, or what I called a lighthouse workshop. The sooner I could do that with the mobilizer, and the mobilizer would naturally bring in the right folks inside their organization to do this session. And this session isn't a one-way street where it's us presenting. It's literally getting a whiteboard and a marker and us passing the pen and designing this collaboratively, coming up with ideas together. Again, using principles that we know work at our organization with other brands who are maybe 18, 24 months down the road. We'll use that as, hey, this isn't what you should do exactly, but here are some ideas of how this could work inside your brand. We ran this really well at Chipotle, and it was not the QSR or fast casual industry was not something we were naturally accustomed to, but we were able to close a really large deal in 7 months by doing this. We got to our third meeting was this design session where we pulled in really powerful folks within our organization. That was my role. And then Nicole on Chipotle's side, the mobilizer, she pulled in the key folks. And from that third session, that's when the magic happened. And from that design session, and where I outlined, this is how we're going to help Chipotle buy this transformation. Here are the steps that we need to go through. Then Nicole and I could get to work asynchronously, meaning what happened outside of the sessions and the meetings, we could work together on a document that internalized this, that she took to Brian Nickel and the CEO signed off on, again, months after that third design session, that lighthouse workshop we did. So asking the right questions, understanding how they buy big things, those are key things you need to suss out early and get into the mobilizer early. And then as quickly as possible that you can get into a design session where you're co-creating, that's a good indicator that you're going to close a deal sooner than later.
Just so we're getting close to the end of the hour. This has been extraordinary. And I actually was just it's funny you bring up talkers. I was thinking about all the talkers I've interacted with. So I've been like distilling and thinking through all of the stuff brought up. But I wanted to ask one last thing, since we promised this in our event promo, was how social changes some of these motions. And especially like Nick and I talk a lot about warming up accounts. And so both of you have large social presences on LinkedIn, of course. But for the seller yourself or the sellers that you work with, how do you see social changing some of the upfront or even throughout the entire buying experience of large deals? And I'm just going to punt that to whoever wants to answer that first.
I can start if you don't mind. I'm going to admit something, and I know it's probably going to get me in a lot of trouble, but I'm going to say it because it's the honest truth. I have not made a cold call in over 2 years, not a single one. And it is because the time I would have invested making cold calls, I've invested into building out a personal brand where I believe my customers go to learn. And so just this morning, right, I had a CEO of a company reach out to me and say, hey, I've been hearing a lot about Challenger. Honestly, I'm on the fence. I'm skeptical about it. Could we just have a call? And what I'm doing is I'm building trust, right? I think what buyers are very concerned or skeptical of is they know if they fill out that lead form, you're in somebody's sales cycle, right? And nobody wants to be sold to. And so I think buyers wait as long as they possibly can and do as much consumption of learning on their own, because that fear of, I don't want to be nagged 50 times a week by a seller who's trying to close me in quarter. And so I think what I've found social to be great at is not about talking about my solution, but actually going out there at scale and talking about the problem and how it's misunderstood. That to me is where you can get people to bite and say, I want to learn and I want to learn from you. And I think the advantage that gives us is when we are shaping and contributing to their learning, it eliminates, like in my case, that they go on, they Google and they read somebody who hates Challenger's white paper on how bad Challenger sucks, right? Like I just want to be part of the learning process. That to me is the biggest place where social is beneficial to me.
Yeah, I think Jen is spot on there. I wouldn't add much other than it also helped me personally coming online, particularly on LinkedIn, and posting every day, not just reposting what my marketing put out there, those white papers that we know don't get traction, but disseminating that in my own words. Here's what conversational AI could do to impact a really large retailer, a really large airline. I wanted to put it in my own words and then even take it a step further when I wrote, say, like a blog post about it or an article. And I did that every single day. One, it was helping me create structure to know here are the top 3 things that when I engage with a mobilizer, when I'm engaging with a new brand, here are the top 3 things I get asked all the time. So that would be fuel for my content. So I'll just post about that every day. And I'll do it in my language that I know resonates with a head of a contact center, a head of customer, digital at a really large brand. That's what I would do. And then in the moment that they would quickly look up my profile before we meet for the first time, well, guess what? They see a whole feed of me talking about questions that they're likely going to answer in this meeting. So that was one piece. And then the second piece was writing this stuff actually as a socially anxious introvert helped actually me present better. When I wrote about this stuff, I could crystallize my ideas much better when I was in the room. So those were 2 really key areas that helped with, creating content and showing up every day.
Man, I want to do a little happy dance about
2
all that.
fist bumps to that. We'll raise the room.
All right. We are at the end of the hour, sadly, because I feel like I want this conversation to continue on for like the rest of the day. Honestly, we could just stay on this live stream. But I wanted to thank you both, Brandon and Jen, for joining this special Power Hour. And we always like to invite our guests. Where can people find you? Where should they follow along? Here on LinkedIn?
Certainly for me, LinkedIn is the best place. It's where I am most active. So feel free. I did write a book about my experience of selling 7-figure deals and earning 7 figures. So that can be found at 7stepsto7figures.io. But everything I post about is all on LinkedIn. Everywhere you can engage and dive deeper on the stuff that I put out there to the world, all on LinkedIn.
Awesome.
Yeah, highly recommend Brandon's book. It is a very, very well written, not just thought leader perspective, someone who's done it. And I think that's so important in this particular topic. For me, same thing, big on LinkedIn. I love connecting with people. I love answering questions around, hey, I'm running into this. Have you seen it before? What would you do? So don't be shy about that. And then every week I host a podcast called Winning the Challenger Sale and bring in different people who think like challengers. Brandon, I'm going to get you on it and have them explain how they do it. So that is another place to find me. But Morgan, Nicholas, Brandon, this has been so fun. I candidly have learned a lot too. So thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. It's 2022. No seller should ever have to suffer in silence. If you guys need help, ask. Reach out in the DMs. Don't take the time. Shoot us an email. We're not going to charge you. We'll support you. Like it's 2022. And thank you guys so much for talking about such a big topic and clearing the air about something that we're all wondering. It really means a lot to have you here, and we can't wait to have you again sometime soon.
Definitely.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. This is great.
Bye.